The camera hummed, a low mechanical purr that was the only sound besides my voice. "It started with a laugh," I said, and the words felt hollow in the sterile room. A laugh that was everything, a sound like wind chimes after a storm. That's how I always described Clara, a walking, talking metaphor for pure, unblemished happiness. I stared into the lens, but I saw only the reflection of a man I barely recognized, and behind him the ghost of my life. My mind went back to the old apartment. The sun streamed through a dusty window, illuminating the thousands of imperfections in the wood floor. That was where we met. Not in a crowded bar or a fancy coffee shop, but in a small, quiet moment over a broken bookshelf. She had been clumsy, and I had been a knight in shining armor with a screwdriver. She laughed then, a genuine, joyful sound, and it felt like home. Now my home is a single-framed photograph on a dark mahogany table. Her smile is still there, unchanging, frozen in time. I run a thumb over the cold glass, tracing the curve of her cheek. The memory of that laugh, that genuine, unfiltered joy, still has the power to cut me. But it's not the same sound. It's an echo now, faint and distant, warped by everything that came after. The happiness we built was a house of cards. I knew it deep down, but I chose to believe in its beauty. We were two people who found each other in the chaos of the world, and chose to make our own quiet place. But even in a place as perfect as that, secrets find a way in. A silence can be louder than any argument, and some things, once broken, can't be put back together. The silence between us started as a single hair-thin crack. That silence, the one that started as a hair-thin crack, began with a forgotten promise. We were supposed to go to the mountains for our anniversary, a tradition we'd started years ago. I'd booked a small cabin, and the day before we were set to leave, she told me she couldn't go. She was suddenly cold, dismissive of the plans we had so lovingly made. "Something came up at work," she said, her voice a flat line. "Don't be ridiculous, Leo." It wasn't the words, but the way she said them. The kindness was gone, replaced by a brittle edge I'd never heard before. I tried to argue, my voice rising. "This was important to us," I said. But she just sighed, a sound of profound exasperation. That sigh hurt more than any shouted word could have. I felt it then, the shift. The foundation beneath our happiness, once so solid, had begun to rumble. She became guarded, her eyes a closed book I was no longer allowed to read. One night, I came home early and found her standing in the study, a letter in her hand. Her back was to me, her shoulders stiff. She heard the door and, with a jolt, stuffed the paper into a small, locked mahogany box on the desk. She spun around, her face pale, the lie ready on her lips. "Just tidying up," she said too quickly, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The box was new, and I had never seen it before. The letter, for just a fleeting moment, had been visible. A heavy, official-looking document, with a prominent crinkle in its top right corner. It was a detail so insignificant, yet it became the first piece of the puzzle I couldn't stop trying to solve. The crinkle in that paper became a whisper in my mind. A few days later, while Clara was in the shower, I went to the desk. I wasn't proud of it, but the unease was a live thing now, squirming in my gut. The mahogany box was locked just as I'd suspected, but a simple desk lamp revealed a small, metallic flash hidden beneath a stack of old magazines. It was a burner phone, cheap and scratched, tucked away like a guilty secret. My hands trembled as I picked it up, and my suspicion became a cold, hard fact. Her stories began to unravel with a sickening speed. She would tell me she was at a work dinner, but a quick check of her company's social media showed no such event. She'd say she was helping a friend move, but her car was parked a block away from the house, exactly where she'd left it that morning. The lies were small at first, almost plausible, but they piled up, a mountain of betrayals that I couldn't ignore. My home, once my sanctuary, was now a stage where a performance was being put on just for me. The silence that had once felt so comfortable now felt heavy, oppressive, filled with unsaid words and unrevealed truths. I started to feel like a ghost in my own life, drifting through rooms that were suddenly alien. The shadows on the walls seemed to stretch and twist, becoming lurking secrets. Every floorboard creak, every muffled sound from the other room was a new clue, a new source of paranoia. I found myself listening at doors, watching her every move. The man who was so in love with his wife turning into a silent, obsessive stalker. The old phone, now hidden in my sock drawer, burned a hole in my conscience. The guilt of my actions was a small price to pay for the answers I was convinced it held. I knew I had to open it, to find out what she was hiding, even if it meant destroying everything. The phone in my sock drawer was a ghost in my own home, and in my paranoia, I finally turned it on. I expected to find a lie about the present, a lover's texts, a different life she was planning. But what I found was so much worse. I found her past. The phone held an archived conversation, a single, long exchange from over a decade ago. It was then that I saw her, not as my wife, but as a terrified teenager named Clara. The messages were from a time before she knew how to hide. They chronicled a relationship with a powerful figure from her small, suffocating town. He was a man who didn't offer love but leverage. The messages were a series of pleas, hers to be left alone, his to remind her of her place. She was a pawn, and I could feel her desperate vulnerability with every word on the screen. The trauma was not romantic, but a chilling abuse of power. A slow, agonizing manipulation that left her with nothing but shame. The fear I saw in those messages explained so much about the woman I loved. It was the source of her guardedness, the root of her need to control. She had built a fortress around her heart, and I, in my innocence, had thought I was the one who was truly breaking through. But I was just another person who loved her, and therefore another vulnerability she had to protect. My hands trembled as I scrolled, my own breath hitching in my throat. I could feel the cold stillness of that moment in time as she typed. In my mind, I saw a young Clara, her face pale, her hands shaking as they hovered over the keypad. The narrative, until now so focused on me, shifted completely. I was just an audience to a pain I could never truly understand, a silent witness to a wound that had never healed. She had messaged him one last time, a desperate attempt to sever the connection for good. "I did what you asked. Now leave us alone," she wrote, her words a promise and a plea. The response was a single, chilling line that solidified the psychological trauma she had endured. "You know there is no us. There is only me. And you'll do exactly what I tell you to do, always." The words were devoid of any emotion, a pure assertion of dominance that was more terrifying than any threat. My wife hadn't been lying to me about some new secret. She had been lying to me about her entire life, her entire sense of self, to keep an old secret buried. The ghost in the attic was not a metaphor. It was real, and it was still haunting our home. My pity for her was quickly consumed by a new, creeping fear. I had discovered her secret, and now I was in a dangerous place, standing too close to a truth I wasn't equipped to handle. And I knew that she, in her own twisted way, was about to make me pay for it. That single message from the past, read on a burner phone, became the lens through which I viewed everything. I was no longer an innocent man searching for answers. I was a witness to a trauma, and my discovery made me a threat. Clara must have sensed the shift in me, the subtle way I looked at her, the questions in my eyes. Her response wasn't a confession, but a psychological assault. The game had begun. She started small. I would ask her a direct question about her day, and she would answer with a vague, dismissive retort, then accuse me of not listening. "I told you that already, Leo," she'd say, her tone dripping with disappointment. I knew she hadn't, I was certain of it. But her unwavering conviction, paired with a sudden coldness in her eyes, made me second-guess myself. My own memory, my own perception of reality began to feel like a faulty instrument. The lies grew bolder, more brazen. I confronted her about the burner phone. I didn't show it to her, just told her I knew she was hiding something. She laughed. A soft, chilling sound I barely recognized. "You've been watching too many movies," she said, leaning in, her smile patronizing. "A burner phone? Are you serious?" The dialogue was a twisted dance. I would state a fact, and she would calmly, methodically dismantle it. She'd accuse me of being paranoid, of hallucinating. "You're not sleeping well, are you? It's making you delusional." Her expressions were a cinematic masterclass in emotional manipulation. One moment she was the concerned wife, her brow furrowed with fake worry, her touch soft and reassuring as she gently guided me toward the couch. The next, a mask of contempt would flicker across her face when she thought I wasn't looking, a brief glimpse of the stranger beneath the surface. My confusion turned to helplessness. I started to record our conversations on my phone, just to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. But listening back, her voice was always calm, reasoned, while mine sounded strained, bordering on hysterical. She was a puppet master, and I was dancing on her strings, the narration of my own life now written by her. My psychological state deteriorated quickly. I stopped sleeping. I lost my appetite. I became obsessed with proving her wrong, spending hours going through old bank statements or her social media, searching for some tangible, undeniable evidence. I was a man trapped in a prison of my own design, with her holding the key. And the more I struggled, the more convinced she became that I was the one with the problem. I was unraveling, my sanity fraying thread by thread. The gaslighting reached its peak when she held up a framed photograph of us from our honeymoon. "Look at us," she said, her voice soft and tender. "Remember how happy we were? What happened to us, Leo?" It was a moment of profound psychological cruelty, a perfect mirror held up to a broken man. She had used my love against me, turning my past happiness into an accusation. It felt like the final blow. And I knew with chilling clarity that this game of mirrors wasn't about her secrets anymore. It was about my collapse. And just as I was on the verge of breaking completely, a knock came at the door, pulling me back into a reality I desperately wanted to escape. The knock on the door. A sharp, clean sound cut through the suffocating atmosphere of our home. Clara froze, the cruel smile on her face dissolving into a mask of pure terror. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a tiny spark of hope that this wasn't another one of her games. I opened the door to find a man in a rumpled suit standing on my porch. He had tired eyes and a gaze that seemed to miss nothing. "Detective Miller," he said, holding up a badge. "Mind if I have a word with you? About your neighbor, Mr. Harrison?" My mind raced. Harrison, the old man 2 doors down who had been missing for a week. I had heard the sirens, the whispers. A routine check-in, he called it. But his eyes told a different story. They darted past me, scanning the hallway, lingering for a moment on Clara, who was now standing frozen, a statue of feigned innocence. "Just a few questions," Miller said, his voice a low rumble. "You and your wife saw him often, yes?" The question was simple, but his tone was an invitation to a cat-and-mouse game. Clara, with an unnatural calm, said, "We saw him sometimes from a distance." She was playing the part of the oblivious, uninvolved neighbor. I, however, was a wreck. My internal thoughts were a frantic scramble. Does he know? Is he lying? Is this about something else? My hands, hidden behind my back, were clenched into fists. I could feel the sweat beading on my brow. Miller's gaze shifted from Clara back to me. "I see you're close to your neighbors," he said, gesturing vaguely at my yard. "Always good to have a support system." The words were innocuous, but they were laced with a double meaning. Was he talking about Mr. Harrison, or was he talking about the support system I thought I had in my wife? He looked directly at me then, his tired eyes seemingly reading my every thought. He was a professional at this, at making a man's own mind betray him. "You seem a little on edge, son," he said, and I felt my carefully constructed facade begin to crack. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him everything I knew, to show him the burner phone, to tell him about the crinkled letter. But I knew I couldn't, not yet. I had to maintain my composure. I had to play this hand carefully. He stayed for another 5 minutes, asking more questions about Mr. Harrison's routine, his friends, his family. Each question was a subtle probe into our own lives, a test of our stories. He watched me carefully, his gaze unblinking. It was a suffocating pressure, and I felt as though the very air was being squeezed from my lungs. Finally, with a small nod, he turned to leave. "If you think of anything, anything at all," he said, his voice trailing off as he walked down the path. The door closed, and the silence that followed was a vacuum. Clara's mask of innocence fell away, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated fear. She knew this wasn't about our neighbor. It was about her past, and it had finally come knocking. She had a terrible secret, and it seemed to have caught up with her. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a terrible sense of triumph. She wasn't just gaslighting me anymore. She was afraid. And in that moment, I knew I had the power to make her tell me the truth. The moment the door closed behind Detective Miller, The facade cracked. Clara's composure evaporated, replaced by a raw, naked panic I had never seen. "Who was that?" She hissed, her voice a low, desperate plea. "What did he want?" I watched her, the fear in her eyes so genuine it was almost beautiful. This wasn't a performance anymore. This was the real Clara, the frightened teenager from the burner phone, her past finally catching up with her. "He asked about Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice eerily calm. "But I think he was really asking about you." The words were a calculated strike, and she flinched as if I had hit her. The game had flipped. The power dynamic, so carefully manipulated by her for weeks, was now firmly in my hands. The sight of her fear, the complete surrender of her control, was intoxicating. "Don't be ridiculous," she spat, her bravado returning, but it was weak now, a flimsy shield. "You're getting paranoid, Leo, just like I said." But the conviction was gone. I walked toward her slowly, deliberately. She backed away, her movements frantic and panicked. The silence that followed was a ticking bomb. "Don't lie to me again, Clara," I said, my voice a low growl. "I saw the messages. I saw what he did to you." The confession hung in the air, a final, unassailable truth that shattered the last remnants of our life together. Her face crumpled, her body shaking with a fury I had never witnessed. She lunged at me, her hands grabbing at a porcelain vase on a nearby table, and in a flash of white, it shattered against the wall behind me. I stood in the cold silence that followed, shards of shattered porcelain littering the floor like broken promises. The screaming was over, replaced by the profound stillness of our bedroom, an emptiness that a million words could never fill. It was in that moment, as I looked at the broken vase, that I realized our love story was dead. It had not died of a slow sickness, but in a sudden, violent act. The silence that had once defined our love now carried the weight of a shattered life, and the memory of that scream would forever be a part of it. My despair, a consuming fog that had clouded my mind for weeks, suddenly cleared. I saw everything with a chilling clarity, her lies, her manipulation, her fear. The love I had felt for her, a deep and unshakable thing, turned into a cold, hard resolve. I had to know everything, every last secret. No matter the cost, my next move wouldn't be about saving our love, but about finding the truth. And to do that, I would have to find the man who haunted her past, the man who had set this all in motion, the man who made her into a monster. The cold, hard resolve I felt after the screaming match was all that kept me going. I needed to find the source of her fear, the man who haunted her past. I had a name from the burner phone, but no contact. My search led me to a small coffee shop an hour from the city. I was sitting there, a stack of old town records and an even older newspaper in front of me, when a man walked in, shaking the rain from his coat. He was older, with tired eyes and a tired smile. He looked exactly like the person the newspaper had a picture of, a young man named Noah, standing beside a teenage Clara in a blurry photo at some kind of local fair. He saw me, saw the picture, and his smile vanished. "You're Clara's husband, aren't you?" he said, his voice flat. I nodded. He sat down without asking, and the low hum of the coffee shop faded into a distant echo. The dialogue that followed was devastating. "I tried to warn her," Noah said, his gaze fixed on the steam rising from his cup. "I knew what he was. Everyone knew. He preyed on families like hers, people desperate for a little bit of help. The man from the messages, the man who had tormented her, wasn't just a figure from her past. He was a local power broker, a man who had manipulated and abused countless people. The secret wasn't just hers. It was a dark, rotten history woven into the very fabric of that small town. I felt a profound sense of foolishness, the narration of my own story feeling like a lie. I had been so worried about a phantom affair that I completely missed the genuine, deeper betrayal. She had married me not for love, but for a shield. I was her escape, the clean slate she had so desperately needed. She saw me as her protector, her way to finally get away from the monster of her past. But her past wasn't dead. It was still a live thing, pulling her strings, forcing her into a life of lies. "He's still out there," Noah said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And he never forgets a debt." The words hung in the air, cold and heavy. I looked at the picture of the smiling teenage girl, and I saw a victim. And in that moment, The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. My wife was lying to me, not out of malice, but out of fear. But her fear was about to get us both killed, and for the first time I felt not just for myself, but for the woman I had once loved. I had to confront her, not about her lies, but about the truth that was now threatening us both. The drive home from the coffee shop was a blur. Noah's words echoed in my mind, a devastating symphony of her secrets and my foolishness. The gaslighting, the lies, the fear, it all made sense now. I wasn't married to a manipulator. I was married to a victim who had become a master of deceit to survive. I had to confront her, not with anger, but with the cold, hard truth. This was no longer about a broken marriage. It was about a monster from her past, and a truth that was about to get us both killed. I found her in the living room, a glass of wine in her hand, her face a mask of false calm. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice light, as if we hadn't had a screaming match just hours earlier. I didn't respond. I simply took out the old newspaper from my jacket, the one with the blurry photo of her and Noah. Her eyes widened, the bravado draining from her face as she saw the paper and the date on it. "Who is this, Clara?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "Who is the man who never forgets a debt?" Her composure shattered. "He has nothing to do with us," she spat. "It's over, is it?" I countered, my voice rising. "Or is it still you know there is no us, there is only me? Tell me the truth, Clara. Who is he?" My narration described her defiance, the power dynamic flipping in a final, frantic dance as she tried one last time to regain control. "You don't know anything," she shrieked, her voice thick with panic. "You think you're so smart? You think you're the only one with secrets?" The accusation hung in the air, a shocking, unexpected blow. The final deceit, a betrayal from me to her, and I knew exactly what she meant. I too had a past that was not as clean as she had believed. In her desperate attempt to turn the tables, she was exposing the truth she had unknowingly buried. It wasn't just her past that was haunting our present. It was mine as well, my old debts, my own sins. I looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time in weeks, and I saw a woman who was a mirror of my own deceptions. Our beautiful lie of a life was unraveling completely, and in the silence that followed her accusation, the truth became clear. We were both liars. She was not the only one. Our confrontation was no longer just about her past. It was about both of ours, and the terrible cost of our respective secrets. The truth was laid bare, and the line between love and hate was erased. "You think you're the only one with secrets?" Clara's words, a poisoned dart, hit their mark. Her face, a contorted mask of rage and fear, was a reflection of my own. My love story with Clara had been built on a foundation of sand, but I now realized that sand had been hiding a minefield of both our pasts. The final confrontation was not a scream, but a terrifying calm, a negotiation between two people with nothing left to lose. "What do you know about my past?" I asked, my voice a hollow whisper. I had a past of my own, a dark, desperate time before I met Clara. I had done things for money, things I was not proud of, things I had buried so deep I had forgotten they existed. Her laughter was a harsh, bitter sound. "I know everything, Leo. I knew the moment I saw you. I knew about the money, the lies, the people you hurt. You think I fell in love with a blank slate? I fell in love with a man with a past as dirty as mine, a man I thought I could understand." The revelation was a double-edged sword. It explained her newfound guardedness, her accusations, her inability to trust. She was a woman who was in love with a ghost, a mirror of her own past, and she was terrified of what would happen if the truth came to light. "So we're the same," I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. "A pair of liars. Is that what you're saying?" "We could have been," she said, her voice dropping to a low, chilling whisper. "We could have been the two broken pieces that fit together. But you got greedy. You got paranoid. You got in my way. And now," her gaze, once filled with love, was cold and empty. "Now we're just two people who know too much about each other." The dialogue was no longer a fight, but a confession. A chilling truth about our relationship came to the surface. It was never about a love story. It was about two broken people, running from their pasts, finding each other and trying to build a new life out of lies. The unforgivable words were not spoken out of anger, but out of a profound and chilling sadness. It was the end of a long, slow suicide, a final moment of clarity before the fall. The love story was a lie, a beautiful, tragic fiction we told ourselves to survive. In that quiet final moment, something inside me broke. Not my heart, but my spirit. I saw her not as the woman I loved, but as a monstrous echo of my own worst self. I looked at the photograph of us from our wedding day, a happy, loving couple, and in the reflection, I saw only two strangers. She saw it too. She smiled, a sad, knowing smile as if she was finally seeing the truth. She reached out, her hand gently touching my cheek. It was a gesture of profound and terrible finality. It was our last embrace. And in that moment, in the cold, calm silence of our bedroom, I knew what I had to do. The photograph, now a silent spectator, lay on the floor, its glass cracked. The cold touch of her hand on my cheek lingered, a brand of our shared terrible truth. The quiet was absolute, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. There was no rage, no shouting, no frantic energy, just a chilling, terrible stillness. The blade, a simple kitchen knife, rested on the counter. The light caught its edge, a momentary glint of cold resolve. Her eyes, once so full of life and deceit, were now empty, fixed on the shattered glass on the floor. Her breath, a shallow thing, barely disturbed the silence. There was no struggle, no plea, only a slow, final resignation. My hand, steady and unfeeling, reached for the knife. My own reflection stared back from its polished surface, a stranger with a blank expression. The only movement was the slow, steady drip of a leaking faucet. The sound was a metronome, counting the seconds, measuring out the finality of the act. A single bead of blood, dark and viscous, pooled on the white tile. A perfect crimson circle. The floor was now a canvas for the terrible art we had created. My hand, still shaking, held the knife, the weight of the moment a profound and terrible thing. The quiet of the house, once so suffocating, was now a blanket of peaceful finality. Our love story, a thing of lies and betrayals, was finally truly over. The hum of the camera returned, a low, constant presence in the cold room. The stillness of the house, the crimson pool on the tile. It all seemed like a lifetime ago. A woman's voice, calm and professional, broke the silence. "Why? After all the lies, the fear, why didn't you just leave?" The question hung in the air, simple and logical. I looked at her, then back at the photograph of Clara, her smiling face untouched by the horrors that had consumed our lives. The answer wasn't something that could be understood with reason. It was a twisted, personal truth born of a broken mind. "You don't understand," I said, my voice as flat and emotionless as the camera's lens. My final narration began, a confession without remorse. Leaving would have been a lie, a continuation of a story we had both been telling for years. The only way to stop the bleeding, to end the constant deception, was to stop the heart of it. I saw it as an act of mercy, not for her, but for me. The murder wasn't a choice. It was an inevitability. It was the only way to escape the truth, the only way to finally be free. My love story with Clara didn't end in cold-blooded murder. The cold-blooded murder was the final, desperate act of our love story. A final, terrible embrace that would finally, truly end all the lies. My eyes, once filled with terror and confusion, were now empty, devoid of all emotion. I had found my peace, and it was in the silence, a cold and permanent peace. The camera continued to hum,